I got back from deployment 3 weeks earlier than anyone expected. The paperwork had changed at the last minute, and even my closest friends didn't know my arrival date had been moved forward. After months of exhausting days, sleepless nights, and carrying memories I couldn't explain to anyone back home, all I wanted was to unlock the front door, collapse onto my own bed, and finally breathe again. But the moment I stepped inside the apartment, something felt wrong. The lights were on in the middle of the afternoon. Boxes were stacked against the hallway wall. The smell of fresh paint lingered in the air. Then my roommate turned the corner, saw me standing there with my duffel bag, and all the color disappeared from his face. He stood completely still before whispering the words that would change everything I thought I knew. "You weren't supposed to see this." Before we continue, if you believe people deserve kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to Everyday English Podcast. Your support helps us continue bringing heartfelt stories that remind us all how powerful compassion can be. For one long second, my mind raced toward the worst possibilities. I imagined betrayal, secrets, stolen belongings, or some terrible tragedy waiting behind the next door. Deployment changes a person. You learn to expect danger before comfort. Every unusual sound becomes a warning. Every silence feels suspicious. My roommate wasn't just a guy who shared rent with me. Ethan had become family before I left. We had survived years of financial struggles together, celebrated promotions, mourned losses, and promised to look after each other no matter where life sent us. Seeing genuine fear in his eyes hurt far more than anything I had experienced overseas. I slowly walked farther into the apartment. Everything looked familiar, yet strangely different. The old couch had been replaced. The walls were painted a warm shade instead of the dull gray we had always complained about. New curtains covered the windows. Framed photographs decorated the hallway where bare walls had stood for years. None of it made sense. Ethan kept apologizing without explaining anything. He looked like someone trying desperately to stop a surprise from falling apart. The deeper I walked into the apartment, the more confused I became. Then I noticed one particular photograph hanging on the wall. It wasn't new furniture or fresh paint that stopped me. It was the picture itself. It showed my late mother smiling during the happiest summer of my childhood. I had believed that photograph had been lost forever after a flood destroyed most of our family albums years ago. Somehow it was hanging perfectly framed in my own apartment. My hands began to shake. Ethan realized I had seen it. His shoulders dropped as if he had been carrying a weight for months. He quietly admitted that the apartment wasn't simply being redecorated. It had been transformed for me. Months earlier, while I was still overseas, Ethan had received a phone call from my aunt. She had recently discovered several forgotten boxes inside an old storage unit that had belonged to my grandparents. Hidden beneath old blankets and broken furniture were family photographs, handwritten letters, childhood drawings, and dozens of keepsakes everyone believed had disappeared forever. My aunt wanted to surprise me after I returned home, but she lived across the country and couldn't organize everything herself. Ethan volunteered without hesitation. At first, he only planned to frame a few photographs. But every letter he read, every story my aunt shared, and every memory he uncovered made him realize how much of my past had quietly vanished over the years. My father had passed away when I was young. Losing my mother years later had left me carrying grief that never fully healed. During deployment, I often wondered whether anyone would remember the people who shaped me. Ethan decided that when I finally came home, I shouldn't return to an apartment. I should return to my history. Every weekend while I was overseas, he worked another job after his normal shift. Every extra dollar went toward rebuilding the apartment into something that felt like home instead of just another rental. He hunted through antique stores to find furniture similar to what my parents once owned. He carefully restored damaged family photographs with professional help. He created memory walls filled with birthdays, vacations, graduations, and ordinary afternoons that suddenly became priceless because they could never happen again. The project became much larger than he ever expected. Friends from our neighborhood quietly joined him. Our elderly neighbor donated woodworking tools to build custom shelves. Another friend volunteered to restore faded photographs. My aunt mailed handwritten recipes that my mother used every Sunday. Someone even located the exact model of the old record player my parents danced beside when I was little. Piece by piece, strangers and friends worked together without telling me a single word. Ethan had planned everything around my original return date. There were still unfinished boxes because he thought he had 3 more weeks to complete the surprise. My early arrival had interrupted months of secret preparation. That's why he froze when he saw me standing in the doorway. Not because he had done something wrong, but because he believed he had ruined the one gift he hoped would help heal years of invisible pain. I walked through every room in complete silence. Inside the bedroom sat a beautifully restored wooden chest. When I opened it, dozens of letters lay neatly arranged in order. Some were birthday cards from my parents. Others were notes my mother had written after ordinary school days, reminding me how proud she was even when I felt like I had failed. Tears blurred every word. Months spent pretending to be emotionally strong overseas suddenly collapsed beneath the weight of memories I thought were gone forever. For the first time since returning home, I allowed myself to cry. Not quiet tears hidden from everyone else, but honest tears that carried years of loneliness, grief, exhaustion, and relief. Ethan never interrupted. He simply sat nearby, understanding that some moments don't need words. They only need someone willing to stay. Over the following weeks, neighbors visited to explain their part in the surprise. Each story revealed another act of kindness I never knew existed. One woman had spent evenings carefully repairing damaged photographs with tiny brushes. A retired teacher organized family letters into chronological order so future generations could read them. Children from the neighborhood helped plant flowers outside because my mother had always loved colorful gardens. People I barely knew had quietly invested pieces of themselves into rebuilding something they believed mattered. Deployment had taught me how easily the world could break people apart. Coming home taught me something equally important. Sometimes ordinary people choose to rebuild each other instead. That apartment slowly became more than a place to sleep. Friends gathered there every Sunday. My mother's recipes returned to the dinner table. My father's old music filled the living room again. Laughter replaced silence. Memories replaced emptiness. Every photograph reminded me that while loss changes us forever, love refuses to disappear as long as someone chooses to remember. Months later, I asked Ethan why he had sacrificed so much time, money, and energy for someone who simply happened to be his roommate. He smiled and explained that family isn't always created by blood. Sometimes it's created by the people who quietly decide they aren't going to let you face life alone. That simple truth stayed with me far longer than any medal or recognition I received during my service. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment about someone whose kindness changed your life, and subscribe to Everyday English Podcast so we can continue sharing stories that remind us the world still holds extraordinary people. Special request, please comment the words, "Kindness lives on," if you believe even one act of compassion can completely change someone's life. As I looked around the apartment one final time that evening, I realized I hadn't come home early by accident. Life had simply chosen a different moment to remind me that even after the darkest journeys, there are people quietly waiting to help us carry what feels too heavy to hold alone. Sometimes the greatest homecoming isn't returning to a place. It's discovering that while you were busy surviving, others were busy making sure you still had something beautiful waiting when you finally returned.